Have you ever met someone who's confident, but never arrogant? Someone who commands respect without saying a word. That's the secret we're diving into today. Because confidence without ego isn't just powerful, it's magnetic. Have you ever met someone who's confident, but never arrogant? Someone who commands respect without saying a word. That's the secret we're diving into today. Because confidence without ego isn't just powerful, it's magnetic. Confidence without ego has a presence to it that words can hardly capture. It's the kind of confidence that fills a room, not with noise, but with a quiet assurance that draws others in. It's not the confidence that shouts for attention, but the one that earns it naturally, almost effortlessly. People who walk in this kind of confidence don't need to prove themselves, because who they are already speaks louder than anything they could say. This is the kind of presence that makes others feel safe, inspired, and respected in your company. It's magnetic because it doesn't repel with pride. It attracts with authenticity. True confidence is not about inflating yourself. It's about being rooted in who you are. Ego is fragile, always needing validation, always searching for recognition, always competing to stay ahead. But real confidence comes from a place of security. It is the unshakable knowing that you don't need to be more than who you are, and you don't need to be less. When someone has found this balance, they walk with a steadiness that people notice. They don't enter a room to dominate, they enter to contribute. They don't need to say, "I'm important," because their character already demonstrates it. Confidence without ego is powerful because it allows you to be influential without being overbearing, respected without being feared, and admired without being envied. The truth is, many people confuse arrogance with confidence. Arrogance is loud, confidence is quiet. Arrogance puts others down, confidence lifts others up. Arrogance needs the spotlight, confidence creates the spotlight for others. The difference is subtle but profound. Arrogant people think they're proving strength, but what they're really proving is insecurity. Confident people have nothing to prove, so their strength shows without fear. That's why they weren't the ones who shouted the loudest or demanded constant recognition. They were the ones who stood firm in their values, who listened as much as they spoke, and who carried themselves with humility. Nelson Mandela didn't need to raise his voice to be heard. His presence commanded attention. Mother Teresa didn't need to demand respect. Her life of service earned it. True confidence is quiet power, and quiet power always lasts longer than loud noise. To develop confidence without ego, you first have to understand the source of true confidence. It doesn't come from external validation, from applause, or from people's approval. That kind of confidence is temporary because the moment the praise stops, the confidence disappears. True confidence comes from within, from knowing your values, your identity, and your purpose. When you know who you are, you no longer need the world to confirm it. You no longer feel the pressure to measure yourself against others because you understand that your worth isn't in comparison. It's in contribution. A person with confidence without ego doesn't feel threatened by others' success. Instead, they celebrate it. They don't need to compete for attention because they understand that lifting others doesn't lower them. In fact, it raises everyone higher. They have a mindset of abundance, not scarcity. Ego lives in scarcity, believing that if someone else wins, you lose. But confidence lives in abundance, believing that when others shine, the light grows for everyone. This mindset transforms not only your relationships, but also your leadership. Imagine walking into a meeting where everyone is trying to prove they're the smartest in the room. The tension is heavy, the energy competitive, and the focus is on who will come out on top. Now imagine a different meeting where one person walks in with calm confidence, not needing to outshine anyone, but instead focusing on how to add value. That person listens deeply, acknowledges others' ideas, and speaks with clarity when necessary. Without even trying, that person becomes the most respected voice in the room. That's the difference confidence without ego makes. It shifts the atmosphere from competition to collaboration, from insecurity to trust. Ego is about self-preservation, but confidence without ego is about service. Ego says, "What can I get from this?" Confidence says, "What can I give to this?" The irony is that when you serve first, you end up receiving more respect, trust, and influence than if you had demanded it. The greatest leaders understand this principle. You gain power not by taking it, but by giving it. When you help others succeed, your success multiplies. When you put others before yourself, people naturally put you in positions of respect and influence. But here's the challenge. Walking in confidence without ego requires discipline. It requires the ability to quiet the voice inside that says, prove yourself, demand attention, show them you're better. It requires maturity to recognize that strength is not about pushing others down, but about lifting them up. Every time you resist the urge to feed your ego, you strengthen your confidence. Every time you choose humility over pride, you deepen your influence. And every time you put others first, you expand your impact. Think about relationships. Ego destroys them, but confidence builds them. Ego says, I need to win this argument. Confidence says, I don't need to win. I need to understand. Ego creates walls. Confidence builds bridges. Ego thrives on being right. Confidence thrives on doing what's right. If you want healthy relationships, whether personal or professional, confidence without ego is the foundation. People don't want to follow someone who always needs to prove their superiority. They want to follow someone who respects them, values them, and inspires them. In your career, this principle is just as powerful. The employees who rise the fastest are not always the loudest or the most self-promoting. They are the ones who consistently show competence with humility. They are the ones who let their work speak for itself, who support their teammates, and who lead by example. Supervisors and leaders recognize the difference between someone who is confident in their abilities and someone whose ego is driving them. Over time, ego-driven people burn bridges, but confident people without ego build networks of trust that carry them further than ego ever could. Confidence without ego also transforms how you face challenges. Ego fears failure because failure threatens its image. Confidence embraces failure because it sees it as part of growth. Ego hides mistakes, but confidence learns from them. Ego needs to appear perfect, but confidence isn't afraid to be human. When you approach challenges with this kind of mindset, you become unstoppable. You no longer fear setbacks because you know they don't define you. You don't fear criticism because you know it doesn't diminish your worth. You don't fear competition because you know your purpose is unique. That resilience is magnetic, and people are drawn to it. Now, let's consider influence. Influence is not about control, it's about impact. Ego tries to control people, forcing them to listen, to follow, to obey. But confidence without ego inspires people. It makes them want to follow, not because they're forced to, but because they're moved to. Influence rooted in ego is temporary. It lasts only as long as fear or manipulation can hold. But influence rooted in confidence and humility is lasting. It builds loyalty, respect, and trust that no ego-driven power can match. The truth is, the world is hungry for leaders, friends, and partners who embody confidence without ego. In a culture where self-promotion, arrogance, and attention-seeking are everywhere, those who choose humility stand out even more. The magnetic pull of confidence without ego is that it makes others feel seen, valued, and empowered. People remember not what you said, but how you made them feel. And when you make people feel respected and uplifted, they will never forget you. Confidence without ego is not weakness. It's strength under control. It's power with humility. It's influence without intimidation. It's leadership with service. It's knowing your worth without needing to announce it. And when you live this way, you create an atmosphere where people naturally respect you, trust you, and want to follow you. So, how do you begin to cultivate this kind of confidence? Start by knowing yourself deeply. The more secure you are in who you are, the less you'll feel the need to prove it. Root your identity in something unshakable, your values, your faith, your purpose. Then, practice humility daily. Choose to listen before you speak, to celebrate others before yourself, to serve rather than to be served. And finally, remind yourself that real respect is never taken, it's always earned. Confidence without ego isn't about being perfect. It's about being authentic. It's about showing up fully as yourself, without the mask of arrogance or the weight of insecurity. It's about standing tall, not to tower over others, but to lift them higher. And when you live this way, you won't need to demand respect you'll attract it. You won't need to chase influence. It will follow you. And you won't need to prove your greatness. It will be evident in the way you treat others. This is the secret. Confidence without ego doesn't just change how others see you. It changes how you see yourself. It frees you from the exhausting cycle of seeking validation, competing for attention, and defending your pride. It allows you to live with peace, walk with strength, and lead with purpose. And that kind of life isn't just powerful. It's magnetic. True confidence isn't about showing off. It's about showing up. People respect those who lead with humility, courage, and authenticity. Ego shouts, confidence whispers. Ego demands attention, confidence earns it. In this video, we'll uncover how you can build respect, influence, and trust without pushing too hard or losing who you are. True confidence isn't about showing off, it's about showing up. People respect those who lead with humility, courage, and authenticity. Ego shouts, confidence whispers. Ego demands attention, confidence earns it. In this video, we'll uncover how you can build respect, influence, and trust without pushing too hard or losing who you are. This is a truth that many overlook, yet it is one of the greatest secrets to living a life of impact and significance. Confidence is not something you wear like a mask, it is something you carry within you. Ego is loud, desperate, and always needing to be seen, but true confidence is quiet, steady, and always effective. When you walk in confidence, you don't need to broadcast your value, it shines naturally. From the moment you walk into a room, people can sense the energy you carry. They can feel whether you are secure in yourself or whether you are hiding behind arrogance. Confidence doesn't need to declare itself because it's self-evident. Ego is an empty drum that makes a lot of noise, but confidence is like a solid rock. It doesn't need to make noise to prove its strength. When you show up with authenticity, humility, and courage, you build influence that cannot be faked. Influence that lasts is never built on ego, because ego is fragile. But confidence built on character and truth is unshakable. Why is confidence so powerful? Because it is deeply connected to trust. People do not trust arrogance, but they trust those who are real, who are consistent, and who are grounded. Confidence creates stability in relationships, leadership, and even in personal growth. When you meet someone who is authentically confident, you feel safer around them. You feel more willing to open up, to listen, and to follow. This is why confidence builds respect naturally, because respect is earned, not demanded. Think of the difference between a leader who shouts orders and one who simply lives in a way that commands attention. The one who shouts is often compensating for a lack of true confidence, but the one who leads by example speaks volumes without saying much. People are drawn to them because they embody something rare: strength without pride, courage without arrogance, influence without manipulation. That is the magnetism of true confidence. Confidence is also not about being fearless, it's about facing fear with faith. Ego pretends it has no weaknesses, but confidence acknowledges limitations and still moves forward. Ego hides behind pride, but confidence stands in vulnerability. When you choose to show up authentically, even when you feel nervous or uncertain, you're proving to yourself and others that your worth isn't dependent on perfection. People respect this kind of honesty because it shows courage. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to keep going in spite of fear. Another distinction is that ego drains relationships while confidence fuels them. Ego always asks, how can I be noticed? How can I get ahead? How can I prove myself? But confidence asks, how can I add value? How can I serve? How can I help others rise? When you lead with confidence, you don't need to compete with others. You collaborate with them. You don't see other people's success as a threat. You see it as inspiration. That's why confident people create environments where everyone grows, while ego-driven people create environments filled with tension and insecurity. Confidence without ego is powerful in leadership because it builds influence that lasts. People may follow an arrogant leader out of fear or obligation, but they will only stay loyal to a confident leader who respects and empowers them. Influence based on ego is temporary. Influence based on character is eternal. When you lead with humility, courage, and authenticity, you don't just build followers, you build leaders. You reproduce confidence in others, and that creates a ripple effect that outlives you. One of the greatest truths about confidence is that it doesn't need external validation to survive. Ego thrives on applause and attention. When the applause fades, the ego collapses. But confidence is self-sustaining because it is rooted in identity and purpose. If you know who you are, you don't need others to tell you. If you know why you're here, you don't need the world to approve. This kind of confidence is liberating because it frees you from the endless cycle of comparison and competition. You no longer measure your worth by likes, views, or opinions. You measure it by your ability to live true to your values and purpose. Confidence without ego is also deeply magnetic in relationships. People want to be around those who make them feel seen, valued, and respected. Ego makes everything about itself, but confidence makes room for others. Ego dominates conversations, but confidence listens. Ego demands admiration, but confidence gives encouragement. When you choose to show up fully present, valuing others as much as yourself, people will naturally be drawn to you. Respect, influence, and trust are byproducts of this kind of presence. The danger of ego is that it makes you small even while trying to look big. Ego focuses so much on self-image that it loses the ability to connect authentically. But true confidence expands you. It opens doors, deepens relationships, and enlarges your capacity to make an impact. Ego is fragile because it depends on outside approval. Confidence is resilient because it comes from inner conviction. This resilience allows you to face criticism, rejection, and failure without losing your sense of worth. Another important truth is that confidence whispers while ego shouts. Ego always tries to prove itself, while confidence doesn't need to. Think of a lion walking through the jungle. The lion doesn't need to roar to prove it is the king. Its presence alone commands respect. That is what confidence looks like. It speaks volumes without needing to demand attention. This is why people follow confident individuals even without being asked, because their presence creates assurance and safety. Confidence without ego is not about lowering yourself or pretending you're less than you are. It's about standing tall in your identity without using it to overshadow others. It's about knowing your value without diminishing theirs. This balance creates harmony where people feel uplifted rather than threatened in your presence. When you walk this way, you build respect naturally, because respect is the result of how you make others feel. In today's world, where self-promotion and arrogance are often mistaken for confidence, choosing humility makes you stand out even more. The quiet strength of true confidence cuts through the noise. It shows that you don't need to perform or pretend. You just need to show up as your authentic self. That's why authenticity is at the heart of real confidence. People don't connect with perfection, they connect with honesty. Confidence also requires courage because showing up consistently is not always easy. There will be days when you don't feel enough, when fear whispers louder than faith, when insecurity tries to pull you back. But confidence is a choice to keep showing up, regardless of how you feel. Ego collapses when challenged, but confidence endures. Ego runs from rejection, but confidence learns from it. Ego hides mistakes, but confidence owns them. That kind of courage builds trust because people respect those who don't run from reality. When you live with confidence without ego, you attract opportunities because people know they can trust you. Employers, leaders, and partners look for people who are steady, consistent, and dependable. They want those who can carry responsibility without letting pride get in the way. They want people who lift others rather than compete with them. Confidence without ego creates this kind of reputation, and reputation opens doors that ego could never unlock. Confidence whispers, but its whisper is louder than ego's shout. It whispers through consistency. It whispers through humility. It whispers through integrity. And over time, those whispers become undeniable. People may not always remember what you said, but they will always remember how you made them feel. If you make them feel valued, respected, and inspired, you will earn respect, influence, and trust naturally. True confidence is not about showing off. It's about showing up again and again. It's about being present, being authentic, and being courageous. It's about standing in your identity without needing to defend it. It's about leading with humility, living with values, and serving before shining. And when you walk in this kind of confidence, you don't lose yourself in the process. You find yourself. You find your purpose, your influence, and your impact. This is the kind of confidence the world needs. Not the ego-driven arrogance that divides and destroys, but the quiet strength that unites and builds. If you want to make a lasting impact, if you want to earn respect that endures, then choose confidence without ego. Choose to whisper instead of shout. Choose to serve instead of demand. Choose to show up, because showing up with humility, courage, and authenticity will always outshine showing off. Led with humility, not superiority confidence, is not about proving you're better, it's about proving you care. When you listen more than you speak, you show strength. People lean toward leaders who value others, not those who seek validation. True respect comes from humility, a quiet power that inspires rather than intimidates. Confidence is not about proving you're better, it's about proving you care. When you listen more than you speak, you show strength. People lean toward leaders who value others, not those who seek validation. True respect comes from humility, a quiet power that inspires rather than intimidates. Humility is one of the greatest strengths any man or woman can carry in their lifetime. It is not weakness. It is not silence. It is not lack of ambition. Rather, it is controlled power, disciplined strength, and love translated into action. Humility does not mean thinking less of yourself. It means thinking of yourself less. It means that in every room you step into, you carry the awareness that others matter and their worth is just as valuable as yours. The world has confused arrogance with strength, but arrogance is nothing more than insecurity dressed in loud clothing. When someone needs to prove constantly that they are smarter, richer, stronger, or more capable, what they are really proving is that their inner world is unsettled. Humility doesn't shout, "Look at me." It whispers, "I see you." And that is why humble confidence has more influence than the loudest ego. People are drawn to those who make them feel valued, not to those who make them feel small. Think of the greatest leaders in history. They did not intimidate their way into legacy. They inspired their way into it. They didn't need to crush others to rise higher. They lifted others, and in lifting, they themselves rose. Leadership that intimidates dies when the leader is gone, but leadership that inspires lives on for generations. That is why humility is the foundation of lasting respect. When you care, people remember. When you listen, people trust. When you serve, people follow. To lead with humility, you must learn the art of listening. Listening is one of the greatest forms of strength because it requires discipline. Anyone can talk, but only the wise can listen. When you truly listen, you say to the other person, "Your words matter. Your experience matters. Your perspective matters." And this simple act of valuing another person creates trust. In relationships, in families, in organizations, trust is the soil where respect grows. Confidence without humility easily turns into arrogance, and arrogance destroys influence. It may impress for a moment, but it cannot sustain respect. Humility, however, sustains influence because it is authentic. People know when you genuinely care versus when you are pretending to. Pretending can win applause, but it cannot win hearts. And true leadership, true confidence, is always about winning hearts. Humility also requires security in who you are. The reason many people boast or dominate is because they are insecure. They fear that if they don't shout about their greatness, no one will see it. But the truth is, greatness that is real never needs to be shouted. It is evident. Just as a lion doesn't need to prove it's the king of the jungle, a truly confident person doesn't need to prove their worth. Their presence, their character, their consistency speak louder than words. Humility is rooted in security, knowing that your value is fixed, not dependent on proving it every day. True humility also creates space for others to shine. Ego hogs the spotlight. Humility shares it. Ego asks, "How can I be seen?" Humility asks, "How can others be elevated?" And the paradox is this: when you elevate others, you are elevated even more. People are loyal to those who help them rise. They will remember who believed in them, who supported them, who encouraged them when no one else did. That's why humility is not just a virtue, it's a strategy for building lasting influence. Humility is not silence or passivity. It is not allowing others to walk over you. Humility is strength under control. It is having the power to dominate, but choosing to empower instead. It is being right, but choosing to listen. It is being capable, but still making space for others to contribute. This kind of strength inspires because it reflects maturity. Anyone can be loud, not everyone can be wise. Anyone can dominate, not everyone can empower. Respect flows naturally toward humility because people are wired to respond to love and care. If you think about it, you don't truly admire someone who always tries to prove they're better. You may fear them, you may envy them, but you don't respect them. Respect is born from inspiration, not intimidation. It is born from seeing someone value people over power, relationships over reputation, service over status. That is why humility is not just a character trait, it is a leadership tool. Confidence without humility is dangerous because it blinds you. It blinds you to others' needs, to others' perspectives, and even to your own growth. A person who believes they know everything never learns anything. But humility keeps you teachable. It allows you to admit mistakes, to seek counsel, to grow continually. And growth sustains greatness. No one ever became truly great by refusing to learn, but many fell from greatness because they refused to humble themselves. When you lead with humility, people give you something greater than applause. They give you trust. And trust is the currency of leadership. Without trust, no title, no position, no wealth, no recognition can sustain influence. But with trust, even without a title, your influence spreads. Trust cannot be demanded, it must be earned. And humility is the fastest way to earn it, because humility shows people that you are not in it for yourself, you are in it for them. Humility also teaches you to value silence. There are times when saying less is more powerful than saying more. Ego always wants the last word, but humility is secure enough to let go. Ego wants to win the argument, but humility wants to win the relationship. Ego wants to be right, humility wants to be wise. And wisdom outlives rightness every time. Confidence anchored in humility is what separates leaders who fade from those who leave legacies. Arrogance can get you attention, but it cannot sustain respect. Humility may not always get you applause, but it earns loyalty that applause can never buy. People may forget the words of the arrogant, but they will never forget the kindness of the humble. To lead with humility is to live with impact. It is to wake up every day knowing that your goal is not to outshine others, but to bring out their shine. It is to measure your success not by how many people serve you, but by how many people you have served. It is to walk into every room asking, "How can I add value?" instead of, "How can I be valued?" Ironically, when you seek to add value, you become the most valued person in the room. Even in the smallest acts, humility shines. It shows up in saying thank you, in giving credit, in apologizing when you're wrong, in helping when no one is watching. These simple acts carry power because they show authenticity. People are tired of leaders who only care about appearances. They are hungry for leaders who care about people. And the humble leader, the humble man or woman, becomes a rare light in a world filled with egos. If you want to build influence, start with humility. If you want to sustain respect, start with humility. If you want to leave a legacy, start with humility. Humility is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is not silence, it is strength. It is not less, it is more. Lead with humility and you will never lack followers. Serve with humility and you will never lack respect. Live with humility and you will never lack impact, because confidence without humility is a mask, but confidence with humility is a magnet. And the world is always drawn to those who make them feel valued. Be that person. Live that way. Lead that way. Because at the end of your life, people will not remember how loudly you spoke or how strongly you proved yourself. They will remember how deeply you cared. And that is the true power of humility. Stand firm in your values. Confidence without ego means standing your ground without needing to crush others. People respect those who live by principles, who stay steady even when challenged. Don't raise your voice, raise your standards. The moment you align your actions with your values, respect follows naturally. Every person will, at some point in life, be tested in their values. It may happen quietly in the privacy of your decisions or publicly in front of critics and opposition. But one truth will never change: people respect consistency. They respect individuals who know what they believe, why they believe it, and who refuse to compromise those convictions simply because circumstances grow uncomfortable. Standing firm in your values is not about being stubborn or inflexible. It is about being anchored. It is about having a foundation so secure that no storm can uproot you. Confidence without ego is the fruit of this kind of grounding Because when your confidence is rooted in values, you no longer need to crush others, prove yourself, or dominate to be seen. You stand because your principles hold you up, and when people see that, they are drawn to respect you. The mistake many make is assuming that confidence is a loud display of superiority, or that to earn respect, one must be the strongest voice in the room. But the opposite is true. True leaders are not those who shout the loudest, but those who remain steady when everything else is shaking. Values create that steadiness. When your compass is fixed, you don't get lost in the chaos of emotions, peer pressure, or shifting trends. While others compromise to fit in or gain quick approval, the one who stands firm shines like a lighthouse, a steady guide in the storm. Imagine a person who changes with every crowd they are in. With one group, they pretend to believe one thing. With another, they quickly shift their position. At first glance, they may seem adaptable, but over time, people see through the act. They recognize inconsistency. They realize that this person cannot be trusted because there is no stability in their words or actions. On the other hand, someone who consistently lives by their values, who shows integrity, whether in the spotlight or behind closed doors, gains a reputation for reliability. And reliability breeds respect. Standing firm in your values doesn't mean you are rigid or unwilling to learn. It doesn't mean you refuse to listen or adapt when truth demands it. Rather, it means that your identity is not negotiable. It means that your integrity cannot be bought. It means you would rather lose temporary opportunities than betray eternal principles. People may disagree with you, but they cannot deny their respect for you when they see that your values are not for sale. History is full of examples of men and women who stood firm in their values and, as a result, gained influence beyond measure. Martin Luther King Jr. did not sway in his belief in justice and equality, even when threatened. Nelson Mandela endured years in prison because his principles were stronger than his desire for comfort. Their confidence was not loud arrogance, but quiet determination, anchored in values that could not be shaken. That is why people listened. That is why their voices still echo today. Confidence without ego is a delicate balance. Ego says, I must win, even if it means crushing you. Confidence says, I will stand on what I believe, and I don't need to crush you to prove it. Ego shouts, trying to control through force. Confidence whispers, but its voice carries weight because it comes from a place of authenticity and principle. The moment you raise your standards instead of raising your voice, people notice. They recognize that you are not reactive, but intentional, not swayed by temporary emotions, but rooted in eternal truth. The danger of ego-driven confidence is that it often relies on comparison. It says, I am only strong if I am stronger than you. I am only wise if I can prove you wrong. But confidence rooted in values needs no comparison. It does not seek to belittle others because it draws strength from within, from something deeper than human approval. When you live by your principles, you stop competing with others and start competing with your own potential. You measure your success not by how many you have dominated, but by how true you have remained to your standards. That is where respect comes from. There will always be pressure to lower your values for the sake of convenience. You may be tempted to compromise honesty because lying seems easier. You may feel pressured to bend your morals because everyone else is doing it. You may be enticed to abandon discipline because indulgence offers quick gratification. But every time you stand firm, you prove that your character is not weak. And over time, that consistency will outlast and outshine those who chose shortcuts. Respect is never built overnight. It is built moment by moment, decision by decision, until others know exactly what to expect from you. Truth, integrity, stability. Respect does not follow noise, it follows substance. Anyone can put on a show, but shows fade. Ego-driven confidence may dazzle temporarily, but it collapses because it is hollow. Confidence anchored in values, however, endures. People will remember you not for your performance, but for your principles. They will not recall how loudly you spoke, but how consistently you lived. And in the end, that kind of respect cannot be taken away because it was not built on the shifting sands of ego, but on the solid foundation of values. So, when life tests you, and it will, choose to stand firm. When compromise looks easy, choose to uphold your principles. When others bow to pressure, choose to remain steady. Because confidence without ego is not about being louder, bigger, or tougher. It's about being unwavering in what you believe. And the paradox is this: the more you choose values over validation, the more respect you gain, the more influence you carry, and the more impact you make. Serve before you shine. The most respected leaders don't chase the spotlight, they create it for others. Ego asks, what can I gain? Confidence asks, how can I contribute? The paradox is this: when you serve, you shine brighter than if you demanded the stage. Respect is not seized, it's earned by lifting others. Serve before you shine. Those 4 words hold a wisdom that is rare in our world today, because we live in an age where so many people are chasing recognition, chasing applause, chasing validation, and chasing influence. But the truth is this: the leaders who leave the deepest marks in history were not the ones who screamed for attention, nor the ones who demanded the stage, nor the ones who made everything about themselves. They were the ones who served. They were the ones who looked beyond their own needs, beyond their own ambitions, and chose instead to elevate others. They understood a timeless principle: when you chase the spotlight, you might gain temporary attention, but when you create the spotlight for others, you gain eternal respect. That is the paradox of greatness. You shine brightest when shining isn't your goal. Ego always whispers, what can I gain? What can I take? What recognition will this bring me? Ego is hungry for status and applause. And yet ego is never satisfied, because no matter how much you feed it, it always craves more. But confidence rooted in humility asks a different question. How can I contribute? How can I serve? How can I make someone else's life better? This shift in perspective is what separates ego-driven leaders from servant leaders. Ego-driven leaders exhaust people. Servant leaders empower people. Ego-driven leaders drain the room. Servant leaders light up the room. And over time, it is not ego that earns respect. It is service. Look at the great leaders who have shaped nations, movements, and communities. Whether it was Mahatma Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Nelson Mandela, or Martin Luther King Jr., their power did not come from demanding attention. Their power came from serving a cause bigger than themselves and lifting others into their potential. They shined because they served. People followed them because they weren't chasing fame, they were chasing impact. That is the power of service. It draws people to you not because you sought the spotlight, but because you lived in such a way that people saw light in you. The tragedy of ego is that it often deceives us into thinking that pushing yourself into the front, fighting for position, or making everything about your name will lead to respect. But ego-driven influence is short-lived. People might cheer for you today, but they'll forget you tomorrow because they were never truly impacted. They were only impressed. Impressions fade, but impact endures. Service creates impact. Service creates legacy. Service builds trust. People do not follow the loudest voice. They follow the one who lifted them up when they were down, the one who gave without demanding, the one who made them feel seen, valued, and empowered. When you serve before you shine, you are not diminishing yourself. You are multiplying your influence. Because in lifting others, you position yourself as a leader people actually want to follow. Think about it. Nobody likes to follow someone who constantly brags about themselves, who steals the spotlight, who hogs credit, or who uses others as stepping stones. But everyone is drawn to someone who shares credit, who gives opportunities, who puts others forward even when they themselves could have taken the glory. That's the leader people trust. That's the leader people respect. Service is not weakness. Service is strength. It takes courage to serve in a world obsessed with self-promotion. It takes confidence to celebrate others when you could have kept the spotlight for yourself. It takes security to say, I don't need to shine in this moment. I'd rather help someone else rise. And yet, the paradox is that those who live this way end up shining the brightest because the light of their legacy cannot be hidden. The person who demands the spotlight burns quickly, but the person who creates light for others burns steadily, and their influence echoes long after they are gone. Think about a candle. If a candle hoards its flame, it remains alone in the darkness. But if it shares its flame to light other candles, the room begins to glow with a brilliance far greater than what one candle could ever create on its own. That is service. When you light others, your light multiplies. You don't lose brightness by sharing, you increase it. This is why service leads to respect and influence in ways ego never can. Ego hoards, service multiplies. Ego demands, service inspires. Ego wants to be seen, service makes sure others are seen. Serving before you shine also shapes your character. It teaches humility, patience, empathy, and wisdom. It reminds you that greatness is not about titles, but about towels, the willingness to kneel, to help, to lift, to give. Even the greatest leaders in faith, history, and business understood this principle. Jesus, for example, washed the feet of his disciples, an act of service that stunned them because he was the leader. Yet in that moment, he taught the greatest leadership lesson of all: the higher you rise, the lower you must be willing to stoop in service. That's how you sustain influence without letting ego corrupt you. When you serve, you build trust, and trust is the currency of leadership. People may admire your talent, they may be impressed by your skill, but they will only follow your leadership if they trust your heart. And trust grows not in moments where you demand recognition, but in moments where you sacrifice for others. Trust grows when people see you put the mission before yourself, the team before your ego, and the cause before your comfort. The truth is, service requires faith. Because when you serve, it can sometimes feel like nobody notices, nobody appreciates it, and nobody rewards it. But in reality, people notice more than you think. They may not applaud in the moment, but they remember. They remember the one who helped them, the one who supported them, the one who gave without keeping score. Over time, that memory grows into respect, loyalty, and influence. Service plants seeds that bloom in seasons you cannot predict, but they always bloom. So, how do you live this principle practically? Start by asking yourself daily, who can I serve today? How can I make someone else's journey lighter? Sometimes service is big, like leading a movement or mentoring someone into greatness. Sometimes it's small, like giving encouragement, offering help, or creating opportunities for someone else to succeed. Service does not always need a stage. It simply needs a heart willing to give. And in giving, you gain what ego could never secure: authentic respect. Serving before shining also protects you from the trap of burnout and emptiness. Because when you chase the spotlight, you can lose yourself in the performance, always striving, always proving, always pushing for recognition. But when you serve, you are grounded in purpose, not performance. You are driven by impact, not applause. You are fulfilled not because people cheered, but because lives were touched. And that kind of fulfillment is deeper, richer, and more lasting than applause could ever provide. Over time, people may forget what you said, they may forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. When you serve others, you make them feel valued, empowered, and inspired. And that feeling is what cements respect in their hearts. That feeling is what builds legacy. That feeling is what makes your influence outlast your lifetime. So let me remind you, don't chase the spotlight. Don't let ego trick you into thinking greatness is about how many people know your name. True greatness is about how many lives you have impacted. True respect is about how many people you have lifted. Serve before you shine, because the paradox is this: the more you serve, the brighter you shine. And when your legacy is written, people will not remember you for the spotlight you demanded. They will remember you for the light you gave. Confidence without ego is a choice. A choice to lead with humility, to live by values, and to put others before yourself. Respect doesn't come from pushing. It comes from being the kind of person others want to follow. Be that person. Walk into every room not to prove yourself, but to improve it. That's how you win respect without ever pushing too hard